The morning stars of Kepler. 442b cast their twin shadows across the crystalline formations when the call came through. Emergency frequencies crackled with panic, voices overlapping in 17 different languages as the crisis unfolded. The Void Stalker had escaped containment again. For 3 standard cycles, the creature had terrorized the Outer Rim territories. Standing 4 meters tall when fully extended, its obsidian carapace reflected no light, seeming to absorb the very essence of illumination around it. 6 limbs ending in razor-sharp appendages could slice through reinforced Adara steel like a heated blade through synthetic butter. Most terrifying of all were its feeding habits. The Void Stalker didn't just consume organic matter. It devoured neural patterns, leaving its victims as empty shells, their consciousness completely obliterated. The Galactic Federation's finest xenobiologists, military tacticians, and containment specialists had all failed. Entire fleets had been dispatched, only to return with half their crews mindless and the other half traumatized beyond rehabilitation. The creature seemed to learn from each encounter, adapting its hunting patterns, evolving its defenses. What had started as a Class 5-7 containment breach had escalated to a Class XIO extinction event threat. That's when someone mentioned the humans. The human colony on Kepler, 442b, was a recent addition to Federation space, their homeworld having achieved faster-than-light travel only 2 centuries prior. They were classified as a Type 2 civilization on the Kardashev scale, barely capable of harnessing their own planet's energy, let alone stellar output. Their military technology was primitive by galactic standards, their ships held together more by determination than proper engineering, and their diplomatic corps had a frustrating tendency to solve complex negotiations with what they called handshake deals that somehow held more weight than 1,000-page legal documents. Yet they had survived. In a galaxy where species routinely went extinct, from everything ranging from stellar phenomena to interdimensional parasites, the humans had not only survived but thrived. They had colonized dozens of worlds, established trade routes that shouldn't have been economically viable, and somehow managed to maintain their independence despite being surrounded by civilizations that could have obliterated them with minimal effort. Commander Zethakala reviewed the human files for the 10th time. The species exhibited several unusual characteristics that defied conventional xenobiological understanding. Their neural plasticity was off the charts, allowing them to adapt to environments and situations that would drive other species to madness. They showed an inexplicable ability to form emotional bonds with virtually any life form, from their own domesticated animals to alien species that had never evolved social behaviors. Most puzzling of all was their apparent immunity to certain forms of psychic influence that could devastate other sentient species. The decision was made in the high command chambers of the Federation flagship Eternal Vigilance. A single human would be recruited for the Void Stalker containment mission. Not a team, not a squad, just one individual. The logic was simple. If the human failed, the loss would be minimal. If they succeeded, the Federation would gain invaluable insight into human capabilities. Marcus Chen had been working the night shift at the atmospheric processing plant when the Federation representatives arrived. At 34 standard Earth years, he was considered middle-aged by human standards, but still in his prime. His personnel file was unremarkable. Born on Earth's Pacific Economic Zone, educated at a mid-tier technical institute, certified in industrial engineering and xenobiology, he had volunteered for colonial service 7 years prior, citing a desire to see what's out there in his application essays. What the file didn't capture was the quiet intensity behind Marcus's dark eyes, the way his hands remained steady even when emergency sirens wailed across the colony, or how he had earned the unofficial title of the Fixer among his colleagues. When equipment failed in ways that shouldn't have been possible, when alien environmental factors created problems that had no solutions in the technical manuals, Marcus somehow found a way to make things work. The Federation delegation was led by Commander Zeth Kalar himself, a Veltari whose crystalline exoskeleton gleamed with embedded rank insignia. Standing nearly 3 meters tall, his species had evolved from hive-minded organisms and still retained a collective consciousness that allowed instantaneous communication across vast distances. The very concept of individual action was foreign to Veltahari psychology, making their interaction with humans particularly fascinating to xenosociologists. Marcus Chen. Zeth Kalar's voice resonated with harmonic undertones that human ears could barely perceive. Your species has been selected for a critical mission. A hostile xenobiological entity has escaped containment and threatens multiple star systems. Standard containment protocols have proven ineffective. We require alternative approaches. Marcus set down his thermal regulator calibrator and turned to face the delegation. The Federation representatives filled the small maintenance bay like giants among toys, their various forms of protective equipment and ceremonial armor creating an imposing wall of authority. Any other species might have been intimidated by such a display. Marcus simply wiped his hands on a cleaning cloth and asked, "What kind of creature are we talking about?" The question caught Zeph Kala off guard. Most species, when confronted with Federation authority, either immediately submitted or launched into elaborate displays of their own importance. Humans, apparently, skipped directly to practical concerns. A void stalker, neural predator, extremely dangerous. Our finest containment specialists have been unable to develop effective countermeasures. Marcus nodded slowly, processing the information. Neural predator, so it feeds on consciousness rather than physical matter. That's interesting. How large? 4 meters in primary configuration. 6 combat appendages. Exoskeleton resistant to most energy weapons. Marcus leaned against his workbench. A habit that spoke of countless hours spent solving complex problems in this exact position. And you want me to catch it? Correct. By myself? Affirmative. The silence stretched between them for nearly a full minute. The other Federation representatives shifted uncomfortably, their various breathing apparatus and environmental suits creating a symphony of mechanical sounds. Marcus appeared to be thinking, his gaze focused on something beyond the maintenance bay walls. Finally, he shrugged. "All right, when do we leave?" The simplicity of the response sent ripples of confusion through the delegation's shared consciousness networks. Where were the demands for additional information? The negotiations over compensation? The elaborate ceremonies that most species required before undertaking dangerous missions? Commander Zeth Kalar found himself experiencing an emotion that the Veltari language had no direct translation for. Something between admiration and bewilderment. "You require no additional details about the mission parameters?" "I figure I'll learn what I need to know once we get there," Marcus replied, already gathering his personal gear. "Though I should probably grab some tools." "You mentioned it has an exoskeleton. I'm guessing conventional weapons aren't doing much good." "Correct. Plasma charges, kinetic projectiles, and directed energy weapons have proven ineffective against its defensive capabilities." Marcus paused in his packing to consider this information. What about its behavior patterns? Does it hunt actively or wait for prey to come to it? The question demonstrated a level of tactical thinking that impressed the military officers in the delegation. Commander Zeph Kala accessed the relevant files through his neural interface, downloading terabytes of data in seconds. The entity appears to employ adaptive hunting strategies. Initial encounters suggested ambush predator behaviors, but recent incidents indicate it has developed more aggressive tactics. It seems to learn from each confrontation, modifying its approach based on the opposition's capabilities. "So it's intelligent?" Marcus pulled on his colony issue jacket, checking the pockets for essential tools. "That's actually good news." "Good news?" The confusion in Zeth Kalar's harmonic voice was unmistakable. "Intelligent creatures can be reasoned with, sometimes." The transport ship Concordance was a marvel of Federation engineering. A sleek vessel that could traverse galactic distances in a matter of days rather than centuries. Its hull incorporated adaptive camouflage technology that made it virtually invisible to both sensor arrays and naked-eye observation. The crew quarters were designed to accommodate dozens of different atmospheric and gravitational requirements, creating a truly multicultural environment that represented the Federation's highest ideals of cooperation. Marcus spent the 3-day journey reading everything the Federation had compiled about Voidstalkers. The species had been discovered only 2 decades prior, inhabiting the ruins of an ancient civilization in the Magellan sector. Initial surveys had identified them as a minor xenobiological curiosity, another apex predator adapted to low-light environments. It wasn't until the first research team went missing that their true nature became apparent. The Voidstalker didn't just kill its prey, it consumed their neural patterns, somehow absorbing not just memories but the very essence of consciousness itself. Survivors of attacks, and there were precious few, described a sensation of emptiness approaching them, followed by a gradual dissolution of thought and identity. Those who escaped early enough retained their sanity but suffered permanent cognitive damage. Those who were fully exposed became living shells, their bodies functioning but their minds completely gone. What made the creatures particularly dangerous was their apparent ability to utilize absorbed neural patterns. Each victim made the Voidstalker more intelligent, more adaptable, more capable of understanding and countering the tactics used against it. The specimen that had escaped containment had absorbed the consciousness of at least 47 individuals, including several of the Federation's most brilliant strategic minds. Marcus absorbed this information with the same methodical approach he applied to technical manuals, taking notes in the margins and cross-referencing behavioral patterns with known Earth predators. His observations would have seemed mundane to most Federation scientists, but they revealed a perspective shaped by a world where humanity had spent millions of years as both predator and prey. Interesting, he murmured to himself, reviewing the attack patterns for the dozenth time. It's not just learning, it's scared. Commander Zethkalar, monitoring Marcus's progress through the ship's surveillance systems, found this assessment puzzling. Fear was not typically associated with Apax predators, especially ones that had demonstrated such devastating effectiveness against Federation forces. The destination was an asteroid mining facility in the Kepler-Par 442 system, not far from Marcus's own colony. The facility had been evacuated after the Voidstalker's arrival, leaving behind a maze of tunnels, processing equipment, and darkened corridors that provided the perfect hunting environment for a creature adapted to lightless conditions. Long-range sensors indicated the entity was moving throughout the facility's lower levels, apparently establishing some form of territory. As the Concordance approached the asteroid, Marcus made his final preparations. His equipment loadout raised eyebrows among the Federation military officers. Instead of weapons, he had packed a collection of tools that belonged more in a maintenance shop than a combat zone. Wire cutters, optical cables, portable power units, and various containers filled with what appeared to be food supplies. "Mr. Chen," Commander Zethkalar inquired through the ship's communication system, "perhaps you would benefit from more conventional armaments?" Marcus shook his head, adjusting the straps on his utility vest. "Weapons would just make it think I was another threat to eliminate. I'm not here to fight this thing." "Then how do you propose to accomplish containment?" "I'm going to talk to it." The silence that followed this statement was so profound that the ship's environmental systems seemed unnaturally loud. Across a dozen different species represented in the crew, the concept of communicating with a neural predator fell somewhere between incomprehensible and suicidal. Marcus. Zethkalar's use of the human's first name indicated the depth of his concern. This entity has consumed the consciousness of 47 sentient beings. It has demonstrated no capacity for communication or negotiation. Your approach lacks any basis in established xenobiological science. Marcus paused in his equipment check to consider this objection. "Commander, has anyone actually tried talking to it?" The question hung in the air like a challenge to everything the Federation thought it knew about interspecies contact. Thousands of hours of tactical analysis, behavioral studies, and containment planning had all been based on the assumption that the Voidstalker was essentially a sophisticated animal. The possibility that it might be capable of meaningful communication had never been seriously considered. The entity's neural consumption patterns suggest that it's trying to understand something, Marcus interrupted gently. "Look at the pattern of attacks. It's not random feeding. It's selective. Scientists, tacticians, engineers, it's consuming specific types of knowledge. That's not the behavior of a simple predator." The observation sent ripples of unease through the ship's crew. Marcus had identified a pattern that had been hiding in plain sight, overlooked by some of the galaxy's finest minds because it challenged their fundamental assumptions about the nature of consciousness and intelligence. The mining facility's docking bay was a vast cavern carved directly from the asteroid's rocky interior. Emergency lighting cast harsh shadows across abandoned equipment and scattered personal belongings, evidence of the hasty evacuation that had followed the Voidstalker's arrival. The air recycling systems were still functional, maintaining a breathable atmosphere throughout most of the complex, but the temperature had dropped significantly without active climate control. Marcus's footsteps echoed strangely in the artificial cavern, the sound waves behaving in unexpected ways due to the facility's unique acoustic properties. His breath misted in the cold air as he made his way toward the main access corridor, following the route that would take him deepest into the facility's infrastructure. Behind him, the Concordance maintained a safe distance, its crew monitoring his progress through an array of sensors and communication devices. The Federation's finest tactical minds watched in fascination and horror as a single human walked deliberately toward a creature that had defeated entire military squadrons. Marcus had studied the facility's blueprints during the journey, memorizing the layout with the same thoroughness he applied to technical specifications. The Voidstalker had been detected primarily in the lower processing levels, areas that were naturally darker and more isolated than the administrative sections. It was establishing territory, which suggested a level of strategic thinking that went beyond simple predation. The first sign of the creature's presence was the silence. Mining facilities were never quiet. Even when shut down, they hummed with the sound of life support systems, automated safety protocols, and structural settling. But as Marcus descended through the facility's levels, the normal background noise gradually faded until he was walking through corridors filled with an almost oppressive quiet. The second sign was the temperature drop. Voidstalkers generated an unusual electromagnetic field that interfered with most electronic systems. The field had a secondary effect of drawing thermal energy from their environment, creating zones of unnatural cold around their presence. Marcus's breath became visible clouds as he reached the facility's third level, and by the time he accessed the main processing area, frost was forming on the corridor walls. The third sign was the darkness. Not the simple absence of light, but something deeper and more unsettling. The facility's emergency lighting should have provided adequate illumination throughout the complex, but the deeper Marcus went, the more the light seemed to diminish, not blocked or absorbed, but somehow made less effective, as if the very nature of illumination was being altered by the creature's presence. Marcus paused at the entrance to the main processing chamber, a cavernous space filled with ore refinement equipment and conveyor systems. His tactical scanner indicated massive electromagnetic distortion ahead, patterns that could only be generated by a living Voidstalker. According to the readings, the creature was approximately 50 meters away, moving slowly through the machinery. He took a deep breath, tasted the metallic tang of recycled air mixed with something else, something that might have been ozone, or fear, or the electromagnetic equivalent of a predator's scent. Then he stepped into the chamber and announced his presence. "Hello." The word echoed strangely in the vast space, seeming to travel further and last longer than physics should have allowed. The electromagnetic readings on Marcus's scanner spiked briefly, then settled into a new pattern that suggested the creature had stopped moving. Marcus waited for a response, counting his heartbeats in the profound silence. When none came, he tried again. "I know you can hear me. My name is Marcus. I'm not here to hurt you." This time, there was a reaction. A shifting in the darkness ahead, barely visible even with his enhanced vision equipment. Something large was moving among the processing machinery, staying just beyond the range of his lights but definitely responding to his words. "I know you're intelligent," Marcus continued, keeping his voice calm and steady. "I know you've been trying to understand us. The people you absorbed. You weren't just feeding, were you? You were learning." The movement stopped again. Marcus took this as encouragement and stepped further into the chamber, his boots clanging softly on the metal decking. The sound seemed to be absorbed by the darkness ahead, creating an effect that made distances difficult to judge. "You're scared," he said quietly. "You found yourself in a place you didn't understand, surrounded by creatures you'd never encountered before, so you did what any intelligent being would do. You tried to learn about them, but the only way you knew how to learn was to absorb them." The silence stretched between them, filled with the subtle sounds of settling metal and distant ventilation systems. Marcus could feel the creature's attention like a physical weight, pressing against his consciousness with an intensity that should have been terrifying but somehow felt more like curiosity. "The problem is," Marcus continued, settling himself on a convenient equipment crate as if he were having a conversation with a colleague, "the people you absorbed were terrified. You got their knowledge, but you also got their fear. And that fear is making you react like a cornered animal instead of the intelligent being you really are." Darkness ahead of him rippled, and suddenly the Voidstalker was there. 4 meters of obsidian nightmare materialized from the shadows, its 6 limbs spreading wide in what could have been a threat display, or simply an attempt to maintain balance on the uneven machinery. Its exoskeleton reflected no light, seeming to absorb illumination from Marcus's equipment and create a zone of deeper darkness around its body. Most unsettling of all were its eyes, not visible organs exactly, but areas of even greater darkness that somehow conveyed the sense of an immense intelligence looking out from behind an alien form. Marcus felt the creature's consciousness brush against his own, a sensation like ice water flowing through his neural pathways. He could feel it probing, testing, trying to understand what manner of being sat so calmly before it. The touch was alien beyond description, but Marcus recognized something familiar in it. the careful approach of a being trying to communicate without a shared language. "There you are," Marcus said softly. "You're beautiful, in your own way." The creature's limbs shifted slightly, and Marcus caught the impression of surprise. Through their tentative neural connection, he sensed fragments of the consciousness it had absorbed. Scientists recoiling in horror, military officers calculating firing solutions, diplomats attempting to establish communication protocols that were doomed to failure because they started from the wrong assumptions. "They were all afraid of you," Marcus continued, maintaining eye contact with the areas of darkness that served as the creature's sensory organs. "But I'm not. You know why?" The neural probe intensified slightly, the creature's attention focused entirely on Marcus's response. "'Cause I understand what it's like to be alone and scared in a place that doesn't make sense. Every human does. We've all been there, in one way or another." Marcus reached slowly into his utility vest, moving with deliberate care to avoid startling the creature. The Voidstalker's limbs tensed slightly, ready to strike, but it made no aggressive moves as he withdrew a small package wrapped in synthetic material. "This is food," Marcus explained, setting the package on the metal decking between them. "From my world, I thought you might be hungry, not for consciousness, but for something simpler." The creature's attention shifted to the package, and Marcus felt its confusion through their neural link. The concept of offering food to a potential threat violated everything the absorbed consciousness told it about predator-prey relationships. "Go ahead," Marcus encouraged. "It won't hurt you. And maybe it will help you remember what it feels like to just be hungry instead of desperate." The Voidstalker approached slowly, its movements surprisingly graceful despite its size. One limb extended toward the package, the razor-sharp appendage delicately manipulating the wrapping to reveal the contents within. Marcus had chosen carefully, high-energy ration bars that were both nutritious and aromatic, designed to appeal to a wide range of digestive systems. The creature consumed the offering with an efficiency that spoke of careful consideration rather than desperate hunger. Through their neural connection, Marcus felt its surprise at the simple pleasure of taste without the overwhelming complexity of absorbed consciousness. For a moment, the alien intelligence seemed almost childlike in its wonder at this new experience. "Better?" Marcus asked gently. The response came not in words, but in a flood of sensory impressions and emotional fragments transmitted directly through their neural link. Marcus experienced the creature's confusion as it awakened in an unfamiliar environment, its desperate hunger driving it to seek the only form of sustenance it understood. He felt its growing intelligence as it absorbed knowledge from its victims, and the mounting horror as it realized that its feeding was causing genuine suffering to other sentient beings. "You didn't know," Marcus said, understanding flooding through him. "You didn't realize there were people." "Not at first." The creature's response was a wash of regret and confusion that would have driven most beings to madness. It had gained the knowledge to understand what it had done, but only after the damage was irreversible. The consciousness it had absorbed remained within it, fragments of 47 different beings crying out in an eternal chorus of loss and fear. Marcus felt tears running down his face as he experienced a fraction of the creature's torment. "You're carrying them all, aren't you? Everyone you absorbed. They're still alive in there, but they're trapped." The affirmation that came through their link was like a scream of anguish that bypassed his ears entirely and struck directly at his emotional centers. The Voidstalker had become a living prison for dozens of consciousness, unable to release them, but equally unable to silence their pain. "That's why you've been so aggressive," Marcus realized. "You're not just defending yourself, you're being driven by their terror and confusion." They think they're still dying, over and over again. The creature's posture shifted, its limbs drawing closer to its central body, in what Marcus recognized as a gesture of defeat and exhaustion. Through their neural connection, he could feel the weight of guilt and desperation that drove every action, every attempt to defend itself, generating fresh waves of trauma from the absorbed consciousness. Marcus stood slowly, keeping his movements calm and unthreatening. "What if I told you there might be a way to help them? To give them peace?" The surge of hope and desperate disbelief that flowed through their link nearly knocked Marcus to his knees. The creature's attention focused on him with an intensity that felt like standing in front of a stellar flare, its entire being concentrated on the possibility of relief from its torment. "I'm not sure it will work," Marcus cautioned, reaching into his equipment pack for a specialized neural interface device. "But my species has experience with consciousness transfer, with helping minds that are trapped or damaged. If you're willing to trust me, I might be able to help them find peace." The device in Marcus's hands was cutting-edge Federation technology, designed for emergency neural intervention in cases of severe brain trauma. It wasn't intended for use with absorbed consciousness, but the principles were similar, creating a stable interface between different neural patterns to allow for therapeutic intervention. "I'll need to connect more deeply with your neural matrix," Marcus explained, holding up the interface device. "It's going to be uncomfortable for both of us. You'll experience my consciousness directly, and I'll experience yours and theirs." The risk was enormous. Full neural interface with a Voidstalker had never been attempted, and the creature's absorbed consciousness could easily overwhelm a single human mind. But Marcus could feel the creature's desperate willingness to try anything that might end the suffering of its victims. "Are you sure?" Marcus asked quietly. "Once we do this, there's no going back. Either we help them, or we all get lost together." The response was immediate and unwavering. A crystalline moment of determination that cut through the chaos of absorbed consciousness, like a beacon in the darkness. The creature understood the risks, but it was willing to take any chance to free the beings trapped within its neural matrix. Marcus activated the interface device and pressed it against the side of his head, feeling the familiar tingling sensation as it synchronized with his neural patterns. Then he approached the Voidstalker, reaching out slowly to place his other hand against the creature's obsidian carapace. The moment of contact was like diving into a hurricane of consciousness. Marcus found himself overwhelmed by a flood of sensory impressions, memories and emotional fragments belonging to dozens of different beings. Scientists screaming as their knowledge was stripped away, military officers trying to maintain tactical awareness even as their strategic thinking was absorbed, civilians crying for loved ones they would never see again. The cacophony of trapped consciousness was beyond anything he had imagined, but underneath it all he could feel the creature's own mind, vast, alien, but fundamentally gentle. The Voidstalker was not a predator by choice, but a being that had evolved a feeding mechanism that was tragically incompatible with truly sentient life. It was like discovering that a beloved pet had been slowly poisoning everyone it touched, unaware of the harm it was causing. Working through the interface device, Marcus began the delicate process of separating individual consciousness from the creature's neural matrix. Each absorbed mind had become tangled with the Voidstalker's own thoughts, creating a web of interconnected trauma and confusion that required careful unraveling to avoid causing additional damage. The first release was Dr. Elena Vasquez, a xenobiologist who had been part of the initial research team. Her consciousness had been absorbed while she was studying the creature's behavioral patterns, and her scientific curiosity had become mixed with the Voidstalker's own attempts to understand its environment. As Marcus carefully separated her neural patterns from the creature's matrix, he felt her confusion and terror gradually give way to understanding and, finally, peace. "Thank you," her voice whispered through the neuralink as her consciousness found the freedom to move on to whatever lay beyond physical existence. One by one, Marcus worked to free the trapped minds, each release requiring careful attention to avoid damaging either the individual consciousness or the creature's own neural pathways. Some of the absorbed beings were easier to separate than others, those who had maintained their individual identity despite their imprisonment. Others had become so entangled with the Voidstalker's thoughts that freeing them required Marcus to temporarily merge his own consciousness with the creature's, providing a stable foundation while the delicate separation process took place. The work was exhausting beyond anything Marcus had ever experienced. Each freed consciousness took a piece of his mental energy with it, leaving him progressively more drained as the hours passed. But he could feel the creature's growing relief as the pressure of carrying so many trapped minds gradually eased. Commander Kovac, the military strategist whose tactical knowledge had made the Voidstalker so dangerous, was among the most difficult to free. His consciousness had become deeply integrated with the creature's defensive instincts, creating a feedback loop of aggression and paranoia that had driven many of the attacks on Federation forces. Separating his military training from the creature's natural caution required Marcus to experience the full weight of both beings' fear and desperation. "I understand now," Kovac's consciousness communicated as it prepared to depart. "It was never evil, just afraid and alone." The final release was a child, a young Andromedean whose family had been visiting the research station when the Voidstalker escaped. Her consciousness had been absorbed while she was playing in the station's observation lounge, her innocent curiosity making her an easy target for a creature that didn't yet understand the difference between knowledge and suffering. Freeing her required the most delicate touch of all, as her young mind had been severely traumatized by the absorption process. Marcus found himself drawing on memories of his own childhood, creating a mental space filled with safety and comfort where her consciousness could heal before moving on. "Will the dark creature be okay?" she asked through the neural link, her concern for her captor revealing the fundamental innocence that had survived even her traumatic death. "Yes," Marcus assured her, feeling the truth of his words resonate through the connection. "It's going to be okay now." As the last of the trapped consciousness found freedom, Marcus felt the full weight of the Voidstalker's original mind, vast, complex, and filled with a profound intelligence that had been obscured by the chaos of absorbed thoughts. Without the interference of 47 terrified minds, the creature's true nature became apparent. It was not a predator at all, but something closer to a living library, a being evolved to preserve and share knowledge across the vast distances of space. Its neural absorption ability had developed as a method of communication, a way to directly exchange information with other members of its species across the emptiness of the void. The fact that such contact proved fatal to most other forms of life was a tragic accident of evolution, like a flower whose beauty concealed deadly poison. "You're not from this galaxy, are you?" Marcus realized, his understanding filtering through their shared consciousness. The response came in the form of star maps and temporal references that spoke of a journey lasting millions of years. The Voidstalker was an explorer, one of countless beings sent out by an ancient civilization to catalogue and preserve knowledge of the universe. It had arrived in the Milky Way expecting to find others of its kind, or at least beings capable of the same form of consciousness sharing that served as its species' primary method of communication. Instead, it had found a galaxy full of creatures whose neural patterns were fundamentally incompatible with its own. Every attempt at communication resulted in death and absorption, creating a cycle of horror that trapped both the creature and its victims in an endless loop of suffering. "But you learned," Marcus observed. "You figured out that we're different. That's why you've been trying to avoid contact lately." The affirmation that came through their link was tinged with desperate loneliness. The creature had indeed learned to recognize the neural patterns that indicated incompatible consciousness, but this knowledge only served to isolate it further. It was a being designed for communication and knowledge sharing, condemned to eternal solitude by the accident of its evolution. Marcus felt the weight of that loneliness settle into his own consciousness, a profound sadness that spoke of eons spent searching for others who could share its burden of accumulated knowledge. He realized that the Federation's attempts at containment, while well-intentioned, had only deepened the creature's isolation and fear. "What if," Marcus suggested carefully, "we found a different way for you to communicate? A method that doesn't require direct consciousness transfer?" The surge of hope that flowed through their connection was tempered by skepticism born of countless failed attempts. The creature's species had evolved beyond the need for crude vocal or visual communication, developing instead a form of direct knowledge transfer that was both more efficient and more intimate than any other form of contact. The idea of returning to primitive communication methods seemed almost impossible to contemplate. Marcus began to share his own memories through their neural link. Images of human art, music, literature, and mathematics. He showed the creature how his species had learned to encode complex thoughts and emotions into symbols, sounds, and visual representations that could be shared without direct neural contact. The concept was foreign to the Voidstalker's experience, but its vast intelligence quickly grasped the underlying principles. "We could teach you," Marcus offered, "our languages, our art forms, our methods of preserving and sharing knowledge. It wouldn't be the same as what you're used to, but it would allow you to communicate without harming anyone." The response was a cascade of wonder and possibility that nearly overwhelmed Marcus's consciousness. The creature began to envision new forms of expression, ways to translate its accumulated knowledge into formats that other species could safely receive and understand. For the first time in millions of years, it saw a path away from isolation. But there was still the problem of the Federation's fear and mistrust. Even if the creature learned to communicate safely, convincing the galactic government that it was no longer a threat would require overcoming decades of justified terror and the institutional momentum of military containment protocols. "Let me help with that too," Marcus said, feeling the creature's concern through their link. "My species, we're good at building bridges between different kinds of minds. It's what we do." The neural interface session ended slowly, both beings gradually withdrawing from their shared consciousness state with careful attention to avoiding psychological trauma. Marcus found himself sitting on the floor of the processing chamber, his head pounding with the after effects of prolonged neural interface exposure. The Voidstalker had withdrawn to a respectful distance, its posture no longer threatening but somehow diminished, as if the release of the trapped consciousness had physically reduced its size. "How do you feel?" Marcus asked, his voice hoarse from hours of concentration. The response came not through a neural link but through a series of harmonic vibrations that the creature generated through specialized organs in its carapace. The sounds were hauntingly beautiful, like whale song mixed with crystalline chimes, and Marcus realized he was hearing the Voidstalker's natural form of communication for the first time. "I don't understand the specifics," Marcus admitted, "but I think I get the emotional content. You feel lighter?" Another series of harmonics confirmed his interpretation. Without the weight of 47 trapped consciousness, the creature was able to function as it had evolved to do, as an explorer and knowledge seeker rather than an unwilling predator. Marcus activated his communication device, opening a channel to the Concordance. "Commander Zethkala, this is Marcus." Mission accomplished. The response was immediate, though filtered through layers of disbelief and caution. "Chen, our sensors indicate you are in direct proximity to the entity. Are you requesting immediate extraction?" "Negative, Commander. I need you to come down here. Both of you. Bring a xenobiological specialist and a communication expert. We're going to need to set up some very interesting translations." "Marcus, the entity remains a Class X2 threat, approaching it without proper containment protocols." "Commander," Marcus interrupted gently, "trust me on this. The entity isn't a threat anymore. In fact, I think it's going to be one of the most valuable allies the Federation has ever had." The silence that followed this statement lasted nearly 30 seconds, during which Marcus could imagine the frantic discussions taking place aboard the Federation vessel. The concept of treating a Voidstalker as an ally rather than a threat would require a fundamental reassessment of everything they thought they knew about interspecies relations. "Explain," Zethkala finally responded. Marcus looked at the creature, which had settled into what appeared to be a comfortable resting position among the processing machinery. "This being is an explorer, Commander. It's traveled across intergalactic space to catalog and preserve knowledge of the universe. It's been doing this for longer than our civilization has existed. Think about what it could teach us." The implications of Marcus's statement began to sink in. A being with millions of years of experience exploring the universe, carrying knowledge of countless civilizations and cosmic phenomena, could revolutionize the Federation's understanding of science, history, and the very nature of existence itself. "The absorption incidents," Zethkala inquired. "If the entity is truly benevolent, were accidents," Marcus confirmed. "Its species communicates through direct consciousness transfer. It didn't realize that other forms of life couldn't survive the process until it was too late. But we found a solution to that problem." Another harmonic sequence from the Voidstalker seemed to echo Marcus's words, adding emotional undertones that conveyed both apology and hope. The creature was already beginning to experiment with vocal communication, trying to find frequencies and patterns that might be comprehensible to other species. "I'm sending up the initial communication protocols now," Marcus continued, uploading files through his suit's data interface. "It's going to take time to develop full translation capabilities, but the basic framework is solid. This being wants to share its knowledge. We just need to give it safe ways to do so." The next several hours were a whirlwind of activity, as Federation specialists descended into the mining facility to begin the complex process of establishing formal communication with the Voidstalker. The creature proved to be an eager student, quickly mastering basic mathematical concepts and symbolic logic that could serve as a foundation for more complex linguistic development. Shalyn Korvex, the Federation's premier xenolinguist, found herself working with a being whose intelligence surpassed anything in her previous experience. The Voidstalker could process and retain vast amounts of information with perfect accuracy, making it an ideal candidate for rapid language acquisition. Within hours, it was producing recognizable approximations of common Federation terms and concepts. Commander Zethkala observed these developments with a mixture of fascination and professional caution. The military implications of the situation were staggering. A being with millions of years of accumulated knowledge could provide the Federation with insights into everything from advanced propulsion technologies to the location of habitable worlds beyond the galactic rim. But it was the cultural implications that truly excited the Federation's diplomatic corps. The Voidstalker represented the first contact with an intergalactic civilization, a being that could provide first-hand accounts of cosmic phenomena and alien societies that existed beyond the Federation's wildest imagination. The knowledge exchange protocols are functioning well, Dr. Korvex reported to Commander Zeth Kalar as the day's initial session concluded. The entity's neural architecture is incredibly sophisticated. It's like working with a living computer that has perfect recall of everything it has ever experienced. Marcus, exhausted from his role as neural interface specialist but still fascinated by the ongoing developments, found himself serving as the primary intermediary between the creature and the Federation team. His unique experience of directly sharing consciousness with the Voidstalker gave him insights into its thought processes that proved invaluable for establishing trust and understanding. "It wants to help," Marcus explained to the assembled specialists. "This being has been alone for millions of years, carrying knowledge of dead civilizations and extinct phenomena with no one to share it with. Finding the Federation, finding us." The creature's harmonic communications had grown more sophisticated throughout the day, and it was beginning to incorporate elements of Federation standard language into its vocalizations. The effect was hauntingly beautiful, like listening to poetry written by an alien mind that understood the mathematical foundations of emotion. "What does it need from us?" Commander Zeth Kalar asked, his own perspective shifted by hours of observing the creature's patient cooperation with the Federation team. Marcus consulted the notes he had compiled from their various neural interface sessions. Purpose. A mission. It was sent out to explore and catalogue, but it's been cut off from its home civilization for so long that those original orders have become meaningless. It needs new reasons to exist, new knowledge to gather and preserve. The solution, when it emerged from the Federation's high command deliberations, was elegant in its simplicity. The Voidstalker would be granted status as an independent explorer and knowledge seeker, with full Federation support for its continuing mission of cosmic investigation. In exchange, it would share its accumulated knowledge with Federation scientists and serve as a guide for exploration beyond the galactic rim. The formal agreement was signed, or rather, harmonically resonated, 3 days later in a ceremony that brought together representatives from every major species in the Federation. The Voidstalker, which had chosen the designation Keeper of Distant Stars for its interactions with other species, demonstrated its commitment to peaceful cooperation by sharing detailed star charts of the intergalactic void and the locations of several previously unknown civilizations. Marcus found himself appointed as the official human liaison for the Keeper project, a position that required him to maintain regular neural interface sessions to facilitate complex knowledge transfers. It was demanding work, but also profoundly rewarding. Each session provided glimpses into cosmic phenomena and alien civilizations that expanded his understanding of the universe in ways that conventional education never could. The mining facility was converted into a permanent research station, serving as headquarters for the Federation's new intergalactic exploration initiative. The Keeper of Distant Stars took up residence in the facility's lower levels, which were modified to better accommodate its environmental preferences and provide the sophisticated equipment necessary for comprehensive knowledge sharing. Commander Zeth Kalar, promoted to Director of Intergalactic Relations, found his entire worldview transformed by the experience. The Federation's first contact protocols, military containment strategies, and diplomatic frameworks had all been rendered obsolete by a single human's willingness to approach the unknown with empathy rather than fear. "Your species continues to surprise us," Zeth Kalar told Marcus during one of their regular briefings. "Most civilizations would have responded to the Voidstalker threat with overwhelming force. Only humans seem to consider that communication might be possible." Marcus smiled, thinking of the creature that had become both his greatest challenge and his most rewarding collaboration. "We're good at talking to things that aren't supposed to be able to talk back. It's one of our better traits." The Keeper of Distant Stars had indeed proven to be an invaluable ally to the Federation. Its knowledge of cosmic phenomena had advanced their understanding of dark matter, gravitational anomalies, and the large-scale structure of the universe by centuries. Its accounts of extinct civilizations provided insights into everything from advanced mathematics to the ultimate fate of galactic societies. But perhaps most importantly, it had forced the Federation to reconsider its fundamental assumptions about consciousness, intelligence, and the nature of life itself. The discovery that a being they had classified as a mindless predator was actually an ancient explorer seeking knowledge and companionship had profound implications for how they approached other hostile life forms. Years later, when Marcus was asked to write the official report on the Voidstalker incident, He struggled to find words that could adequately convey the transformation that had taken place. How do you describe the moment when fear gives way to understanding? How do you quantify the value of approaching the unknown with curiosity rather than aggression? In the end, he settled for a simple observation that had guided his actions throughout the crisis. The man who destroys his weak self can never be destroyed by others. Facing the Void Stalker had required him to overcome his own fears and preconceptions, to approach an apparently terrifying situation with openness and empathy rather than defensive aggression. The weak self that would have seen only a monster to be contained or destroyed had to be abandoned in favor of a stronger self that could recognize intelligence and suffering in an alien form. Only by conquering his own limitations had Marcus been able to see the truth behind the creature's actions and find a path toward mutual understanding. The Keeper of Distant Stars, meanwhile, had undergone its own transformation. Released from the burden of carrying trapped consciousness and provided with safe methods of communication, it had rediscovered its original purpose as an explorer and knowledge seeker. The loneliness that had driven it to desperate attempts at connection was gradually easing as it formed genuine relationships with Federation scientists and explorers. The mining facility had become a hub of intergalactic research, with teams of specialists from across the galaxy working alongside the Keeper to unlock the secrets of the universe. Each day brought new discoveries, new insights into the nature of reality that challenged and expanded the Federation's understanding of existence itself. Marcus often found himself wondering about the other explorers that the Keeper's civilization had sent out into the void. How many were still out there, traveling between galaxies in search of knowledge and companionship? How many had encountered civilizations like the Federation? And what had been the results of those meetings? The Keeper of Distant Stars shared those same wonderings. Through their neural interface sessions, Marcus had experienced the creature's deep hope that its success with the Federation might serve as a model for other encounters between its people and the countless civilizations scattered across the universe. Perhaps in time, a vast network of knowledge-sharing beings could emerge, connecting species and galaxies in a web of mutual understanding and cooperation. It was an ambitious vision, but one that seemed increasingly achievable as the Federation's relationship with the Keeper continued to develop. The creature's knowledge of intergalactic space was providing them with the tools they would need to reach out to other civilizations, to expand their sphere of understanding beyond the boundaries of their own galaxy. The project was still in its early stages, but already the Federation was planning its first intergalactic expedition, a journey that would have been impossible without the Keeper's guidance and knowledge. Marcus had volunteered to serve as the mission's primary xenobiologist, a role that would allow him to continue his work as an intermediary between human understanding and alien intelligence. As he prepared for that future journey, Marcus often reflected on the moment when he had first encountered the Void Stalker in the depths of the mining facility. The creature that had seemed so terrifying, so alien and incomprehensible, had become one of his closest collaborators and friends. The transformation had required both beings to overcome their initial fears and preconceptions, to reach across the vast gulf of biological and cultural differences in search of common ground. The experience had taught him that intelligence and consciousness could take forms that were utterly alien to human experience, but that the fundamental drives for knowledge, companionship, and understanding seemed to be universal constants. Wherever life developed the capacity for thought and self-awareness, it also developed the need to connect with others, to share experiences and expand its understanding of existence. The Keeper of Distant Stars represented the fulfillment of that universal need, a being whose entire existence was devoted to the gathering and preservation of knowledge. In partnering with the Federation, it had found not just new sources of information, but a community of minds dedicated to the same pursuit of understanding that had driven it across intergalactic space. The mining facility that had once been the site of terror and confusion had become a symbol of hope and cooperation. Beings from across the galaxy came to work alongside the Keeper, each contributing their own unique perspectives and abilities to the grand project of cosmic exploration. The diversity of minds and approaches had accelerated the pace of discovery beyond anything that could have been achieved by any single species working alone. Marcus watched these developments with profound satisfaction, knowing that his small role in the initial contact had helped to make it all possible. The decision to approach the Void Stalker with empathy rather than aggression had consequences that rippled outward through time and space, affecting not just his own life but the future of galactic civilization itself. The man who had walked into that darkened processing chamber had been transformed by the encounter as much as the creature he had come to help. The Marcus Chen, who emerged from the neural interface sessions, was more than he had been before, more aware of the vast complexity and beauty of consciousness, more committed to the pursuit of understanding across all barriers of biology and culture. In conquering his own fears and preconceptions, he had indeed become someone who could not be destroyed by others. The strength that came from understanding himself and his place in the cosmic community was unshakable, founded on principles that transcended any single threat or challenge. The Federation's new relationship with the Keeper of Distant Stars was just the beginning. Across the galaxy, other humans were already applying the lessons learned from the Voidstalker incident to their own encounters with the unknown. The approach of seeking understanding before resorting to force was becoming a hallmark of human exploration, a trait that was earning them recognition as some of the galaxy's most effective diplomats and mediators. As Marcus prepared to embark on the next phase of his journey, the intergalactic expedition that would test everything he had learned about communication and understanding, he carried with him the knowledge that consciousness was far stranger and more wonderful than anyone had imagined. The universe was full of minds like the Keepers, ancient and vast and longing for connection, waiting for someone with the courage to reach out across the darkness and say hello. The story of the man who tamed a monster was really the story of two beings learning to see past their fears and differences to the underlying truth of their shared existence. In a galaxy full of wonders and terrors, perhaps the greatest discovery was the simplest: that understanding was always possible for those brave enough to seek it. And in the depths of space, traveling between stars on missions of exploration and knowledge gathering, other beings like the Keeper of Distant Stars sang their harmonic songs of hope, knowing that somewhere in the vast community of consciousness there were minds willing to listen and understand. The future stretched ahead like an infinite ocean of possibility, filled with civilizations yet to be discovered, forms of consciousness yet to be understood, and bridges yet to be built between alien minds. Marcus Chen, the human who had chosen understanding over fear, would be among those exploring that ocean, carrying with him the knowledge that even the most terrifying stranger might become the most valued friend, given only the courage to try. In the end, that was perhaps the most human trait of all, the willingness to extend a hand in friendship even when facing the utterly unknown. It was a trait that would serve them well in the vast community of minds that awaited them among the stars, a community that was growing larger and more wonderful with each new contact, each new understanding, each new bridge built across the magnificent diversity of conscious existence. The man who destroys his weak self can never be destroyed by others, because that man has learned the ultimate truth, that strength comes not from the ability to fight or resist, but from the courage to understand and connect, to reach across any barrier in search of the consciousness that lies hidden behind even the most alien form. And in the depths of the converted mining facility, the Keeper of Distant Stars continued its ancient mission of gathering and preserving knowledge, no longer alone in the cosmic dark, but surrounded by friends who shared its passion for understanding the infinite mystery of existence itself.